Samuel Cole was a cowboy, but not the kind you often hear about in stories. He wasn't a showy gunslinger, nor a man seeking fame. He was quiet, thoughtful, and had a heart that beat with honesty. His life had always been simple yet hard, spent riding across the wide, open plains of the Southwest. The sun burned down relentlessly, turning the soil a dusty red, and the wind carried both freedom and danger. Samuel had learned early on that life in these parts demanded respect for both nature and people. He had grown up hearing stories of the Apache, the proud native people who had lived on these lands long before settlers arrived. Samuel admired their courage and skill, though he knew tensions often ran high between his own kind and theirs. Over the years, he had learned enough of their ways to survive and even to help when needed, earning trust that few outsiders ever received. Samuel's life, simple as it seemed, was about balance. He understood the fragile line between right and wrong, life and death, survival and honor. It was during one particularly hot summer that everything changed. Samuel was riding along a narrow canyon path when he noticed signs of recent conflict: trampled grass, broken arrows, and the faint echo of distant voices. His instincts told him to be cautious. Cowboys and soldiers often clashed over territory, and Apache scouts moved silently, ready to defend their families and land. But Samuel didn't expect to encounter what he did that day. As he rounded a bend, he saw an old man lying motionless against a boulder. The man's face was lined with years of hardship and wisdom. Beside him were two young women, their faces marked by fear, grief, and strength beyond their years. The air smelled of smoke and blood, but there was a stillness in that moment that made Samuel pause. He dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible, showing he meant no harm. The old man's eyes flickered open, and Samuel instinctively knelt beside him. Though weak, the elder's voice carried authority. "Samuel Cole," he whispered. Samuel froze. How did this man know his name? Then he remembered. The elder had once saved his life during a dangerous encounter years before. Samuel had thought he would never meet him again. Now here he was on the brink of death, reaching out to him in trust. "Take care of them," the elder said, his gaze shifting to the two women. His voice trembled but was firm. "My wives, they are yours now." Samuel's heart skipped a beat. He had not expected this. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like the heavy summer air. These were not just strangers, these were people who depended on him entirely. He looked at the women, their eyes wide and uncertain. One was younger, perhaps barely in her 20s, with long dark hair and a quiet, reserved demeanor. The other had an intense presence, her gaze sharp and unyielding, as if daring anyone to challenge her. Both were grieving, both were frightened, and both were suddenly thrust into a life that Samuel himself had never imagined. The elder coughed painfully, the sound raw and ragged, then continued in a weak voice, "Promise me, you will protect them. Treat them with honor. The world outside, it is not kind. You understand?" Samuel nodded, though he felt the enormity of the promise. He had never married, never planned to, and certainly never imagined inheriting the care of anyone, let alone two women in such circumstances. But something deep within told him this was not a request to refuse. This was a duty, an unspoken bond that demanded courage and respect. As the sun began its slow descent behind the rugged cliffs, Samuel helped the elder to a more comfortable position. The man's breaths were shallow, his body frail from wounds that were too severe to survive. Samuel could see the life slipping away, yet the determination in the elder's eyes remained. He placed a hand over Samuel's and whispered once more, "Remember, honor." Then, with a faint smile, he closed his eyes, leaving Samuel with the quiet sound of the wind and the distant cry of a hawk. The women remained silent for a moment, watching Samuel with cautious eyes. Samuel turned to them gently, trying to offer reassurance. "I will help you," he said simply. "I promise you will be safe with me." The younger woman, Atsa, lowered her gaze, tears welling up but unspoken. The older woman, Najoni, studied Samuel closely. She did not speak immediately, but her eyes held a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. Samuel understood. Trust was not given freely, and especially not in times like these. He could not blame them for their doubt. He spent the rest of the evening preparing a small shelter near the boulder, using blankets and supplies he carried on his horse. The sky turned deep shades of orange and purple, and the first stars appeared, flickering above like distant promises. Samuel built a fire to keep the night cold at bay, and he sat quietly, listening to the soft murmurs of the women as they adjusted to this strange new reality. Days passed, and Samuel realized that survival required more than just shelter. He had to navigate the delicate balance of cultural respect, human emotion, and practical necessity. The women taught him small lessons about their traditions, about ways to forage, about the meanings behind simple gestures and symbols. Samuel listened, absorbing their wisdom, even as he shared what he knew from his life on the plains. At night, the wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the scent of wild sage and distant rivers. Samuel would sit by the fire, keeping watch while the women rested. He often thought of the elders' last words, honor and protection. What did it truly mean to honor someone in such a complex world? He realized that it was more than obedience or survival. It was about understanding, compassion, and the courage to act rightly even when fear threatened to take hold. Word of the unusual arrangement soon spread among nearby settlers and wandering cowboys. Some viewed Samuel with suspicion, whispering that he had taken what was not his. Others were intrigued, wondering how a lone cowboy could manage such a responsibility. Samuel did not respond to gossip. He focused on the immediate needs of the women. He knew that judgment from the outside world was less important than earning their trust and keeping them safe. Atsa began to open up slowly, sharing stories of her childhood, of the songs her mother sang, and the small joys that had once brightened her life. Nijoni, more reserved and stubborn, resisted at first but gradually allowed Samuel to see glimpses of her past, tales of courage, defiance, and survival. Samuel listened without interruption, learning not just about the women, but about the richness of a life intertwined with land, family, and tradition. One afternoon, while scouting for water, Samuel encountered a small group of Apache scouts who had heard about the elder's death. There was tension at first. The scouts were wary of his intentions. But Samuel, drawing on his past experiences and the respect he had earned over years of careful action, spoke honestly and calmly. He explained the elder's wishes and his own commitment to protect the women. After a tense moment, the scouts nodded. Trust had been cautiously extended, and Samuel realized that this fragile bond would be essential for survival. As the days turned into weeks, Samuel noticed something subtle yet profound. Despite the initial shock and grief, the women began to adapt. They found strength in each other and in the routines Samuel helped establish. They learned to hunt, gather, and tend to the small garden Samuel had planted. They laughed quietly at small jokes, shared stories by the fire, and slowly, cautiously, they began to see Samuel not just as a protector, but as a companion and guide through a world that was unpredictable and often dangerous. Samuel too changed. The responsibility he had feared became a source of purpose. He understood that life was not just about wandering or survival, it was about connection, about finding meaning in protecting and supporting others. In caring for Atsa and Nijoni, he discovered a deeper sense of humanity, one that transcended cultural boundaries and the harsh realities of the plains. Evenings were the most peaceful. As the sky turned to deep navy, dotted with countless stars, Samuel would sit with the women, sharing stories and listening to theirs. He learned to read the signs of the land, the subtle shifts in wind and weather, and he taught them the ways of the plains, not as a master, but as a partner who respected their knowledge and heritage. Though challenges loomed, rumors of hostility, the harshness of the wilderness, and the lingering grief from loss, Samuel felt a quiet determination. He had inherited more than just responsibility. He had inherited a chance to bridge worlds, to honor promises, and to discover the true meaning of loyalty, courage, and compassion. And so, under the endless sky, with the fire flickering and the wind whispering through the canyon, Samuel Cole began a journey unlike any he had imagined, one that would test him, challenge him, and ultimately transform him forever. The story of a lone cowboy, 2 grieving women, and a promise made on a summer day was only beginning, and the plains held secrets and adventures that were yet to unfold. As the days turned into weeks, Samuel Cole found himself deeply settled into a life he had never imagined. The rugged land around him was both harsh and beautiful, full of dangers but also of quiet wonders. The 2 women, Atsa and Nijoni, had begun to adjust to their new reality, though each in her own way. Atsa had a gentle nature, learning quickly from Samuel about hunting and farming, often humming the songs of her youth. Nijoni, more fiery and independent, challenged Samuel at times, but he came to respect her strength and resilience. Life in the canyon demanded constant vigilance. Samuel had to find water, hunt for food, and maintain the small shelter they had built. At first, the women observed him silently, unsure if he could truly protect them in this unforgiving land. But as days passed, they witnessed his skill and dedication. Samuel rode the hills to scout for dangers, checked the traps he set, and always returned before sunset. The trust between them began to grow, built on small acts of courage and kindness. One morning, Samuel noticed tracks near their shelter. A small band of settlers had wandered too close to the canyon. Some were friendly, offering supplies and advice, but others were suspicious. Samuel had learned early on that appearances could be deceiving. He approached cautiously, keeping the women behind him. When one man asked if the women were his, Samuel answered simply, "I protect them. That is all you need to know." His calm voice and steady gaze discouraged any further questioning. Slowly, the settlers moved on, leaving Samuel and the women in peace. Life was not easy, but it was real. Samuel taught the women how to hunt small game, gather wild herbs, and read the signs of approaching weather. Atsa, with her quiet curiosity, learned quickly and began to enjoy the tasks, finding small joys in her new skills. Nijoni, while slower to accept guidance, proved herself capable, often surprising Samuel with her ingenuity. They learned from each other, and Samuel in turn learned from them. The bond between the three grew stronger with each passing day. Around the campfire at night, they shared stories. Atsa told of her childhood by a river, of her mother's laughter and the songs that once filled her home. Nijoni spoke of challenges she had faced, of battles fought in her mind and body to survive. Samuel listened, sometimes quietly, sometimes sharing stories of his own life as a cowboy. The loneliness, the freedom, the struggles, and the moments of unexpected joy. In those quiet hours, laughter began to echo through the canyon, yet the world outside was never far away. Samuel had heard rumors of increasing tension between settlers and Apache bands. He knew that maintaining peace and safety for the women required careful navigation of this dangerous reality. One evening, scouts from a nearby Apache group arrived. Samuel greeted them with respect, bowing slightly as was customary. He explained his promise to the elder, that he would protect the women with honor. The scouts observed him carefully, but seeing the sincerity in his eyes, they nodded in understanding. Samuel realized that survival depended not only on strength but on respect and trust. Atsa and Nijoni began to find a sense of belonging in this unusual family. Atsa, once shy and cautious, started to smile more, her laughter mingling with the crackling of the fire. Nijoni, though still independent, allowed herself to rest, trusting Samuel's judgment in ways she had never imagined. Samuel noticed small changes, a relaxed posture, a willingness to share thoughts, a sense of hope that had been absent when he first met them. It was a quiet transformation, subtle but powerful. The seasons changed, and with each change came new challenges. Winter brought freezing nights and snow that blanketed the canyon. Samuel worked tirelessly to ensure the firewood was sufficient, the shelter secure, and the women warm. He showed them how to layer clothing, preserve food, and navigate the slippery terrain safely. The women in turn helped where they could, learning to chop wood, carry supplies, and even make small repairs to the shelter. Together they created a rhythm, a daily routine that kept them alive and strengthened their bond. Spring brought life back to the land. Flowers bloomed along the hillsides and animals returned to the valleys. Samuel taught the women to track game, to understand the behavior of birds and deer, and to anticipate the rainstorms that would nourish their crops. Atsa began planting a small garden near the shelter, using seeds Samuel had brought. Nijoni, initially reluctant, started experimenting with ways to preserve herbs and food, finding satisfaction in creating stability in their otherwise unpredictable world. Despite the hardships, there were moments of beauty and joy. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of pink and gold, the three of them stood atop a ridge looking over the land that had become their home. Samuel felt a deep sense of peace, realizing that the promise he had made was not a burden but a privilege. Atsa rested her head on his shoulder and Nijoni stood beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon, alert yet calm. Together they had survived, and together they had created something new, a family forged not by tradition alone but by trust, respect, and shared experience. Challenges still arose. Travelers occasionally passed through the canyon, some curious, others hostile. Samuel learned to approach strangers with caution, always ready to protect the women without unnecessary aggression. The women, once vulnerable, learned to be alert and to assist Samuel in observing the land for potential threats. Their teamwork grew, blending the skills and knowledge of 3 very different lives into a single unit capable of facing whatever came their way. Over time, Samuel observed another subtle transformation within himself. He had always valued freedom above all, riding the plains with few ties. Now he found meaning in responsibility, in connection, in protecting lives and nurturing hope. The women's presence brought warmth to his life, not in a way of possession, but of shared humanity. They taught him patience, empathy, and the power of quiet courage. He realized that strength was not measured by guns or fists, but by the ability to care for others, even when it required sacrifice. One particular morning, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. The wind howled through the canyon and heavy rain threatened to flood their shelter. Samuel worked tirelessly, reinforcing the walls and clearing drainage paths. Atsa and Nijoni helped, each contributing in their own way. The storm raged through the night and Samuel stayed awake, ensuring that they were safe. By dawn, the sun broke through the clouds and the 3 of them looked at the shelter, intact, dry, and a testament to their combined effort. The experience strengthened their bond even further. They had faced fear together, survived it, and come out stronger. Samuel saw pride in the women's eyes, and they saw determination and care in his. Trust was no longer tentative. It had grown deep roots, unshakable even in the harshest conditions. Samuel also began to teach the women lessons beyond survival. He spoke of respect for the land, for the animals, and for each other. He shared his thoughts on honesty, fairness, and courage. The lessons were simple yet powerful, shaping not just skills but character. Atsa and Nijoni absorbed these lessons, often reminding Samuel of the importance of patience, balance, and understanding. Together they learned that life was not just about surviving, but about living with purpose and integrity. Months turned into a year, and the canyon that had seemed empty and lonely became a home full of life. Birds nested nearby, deer grazed in the valleys, and even the harsh winds seemed gentler now. Samuel, Atsa, and Nijoni had created routines, traditions, and rituals that gave their lives rhythm and meaning. They celebrated small victories, harvesting crops, successful hunts, clear skies after storms with gratitude and laughter. Each day reinforced the unspoken promise that bound them together. And in the quiet moments, when the stars sparkled above and the fire crackled softly, Samuel reflected on how a single day, a single promise had changed everything. From the moment the elder had entrusted the women to him, his life had taken a turn he could never have imagined. He had inherited more than responsibility. He had inherited the chance to build a new kind of family, one that honored tradition yet embraced change, one that faced hardship with courage and hope. In this canyon, under the vast open sky, Samuel Cole Atsa and Nijoni discovered something rare and precious, a bond that transcended blood, a sense of home that transcended walls, and a trust that transcended fear. The story of a cowboy and 2 women who had faced loss, danger, and uncertainty together became a tale of courage, loyalty, and the enduring power of human connection. Though challenges would continue to arise, Samuel knew they could face anything together. They were no longer simply a cowboy and 2 women thrown together by fate. They were a family forged in the fires of adversity, tempered by respect and strengthened by love in its purest form, care, trust, and unwavering support. And so, as the wind whispered through the canyon and the stars shimmered above, the 3 of them sat by the fire sharing stories and quiet smiles. Life was not perfect, but it was theirs. Together, they had carved out a place in the world where honor, courage, and hope endured. And that was enough.